So the next intervention is an oral presentation from Dr. Ulsh. Ulsh?
Ulsh.
Ulsh,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
As outlined in CMD 15H5.3. Dr. Ulsh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Bender. Good morning. For the record, my name is Brant Ulsh, and I would first like to thank the commissioners for allowing me the opportunity to participate in this important hearing. Commissioners, you may recall that I spoke to you last month at your hearings up at Bruce, and I was very interested to hear the discussion after the previous presenter about the importance of the effects of tritium on fish, because that's one of the topics that I'm going to be covering again. It will sound familiar to you, but since the audience is a bit different, I will cover those points again. I came here today to offer my perspective as a radiation safety professional, an independent person. I have no affiliation with SRB, and I have over 30 years of experience and training in the radiation health sciences. I'm a certified health physicist, and I hold a PhD in radiological health sciences. I also completed a postdoc appointment at the McMaster Institute of Applied Radiation Sciences in Hamilton. The focus of my research has been on the effects of low doses of radiation both on humans and on non-human species exposed in the environment. And based on this experience, I believe I can offer you an informed scientific opinion on some of the matters that you're going to be talking about today. So we all know that the substance of concern here is tritium. And the question that we're discussing is whether or not SRB has taken reasonable precautions to ensure that its operations present no significant threat to public health and to the environment. And I think that the answer to that question today is very different than the answer I would have come up with 10 years ago. According to the latest independent environmental monitoring data available from the CNSC, the maximum concentration of tritium in surface water near SRB is within the range of background, and these are concentrations that are almost 1,000 times less than the Canadian tritium drinking water limit designed to ensure public health, protect human health. But what about non-human organisms like fish? Is the tritium from SRB causing any negative impacts in these species? Well, I've been collaborating with researchers from the Canadian Nuclear Laboratory, just half an hour up the road, up Highway 17 from here, and we were investigating exactly that question. What are the effects of low doses of tritium on fish species? CNL researchers exposed fish cells to concentrations ranging from natural background, which is similar to the levels in water near SRB. That's the low end of the range that we looked at. And on the high end, we looked all the way up to 10,000 times higher than that. We performed 8 different biological tests of biological effects. And each test that we used with the fish cells that we exposed to tritium was designed to tell us something different about the health of those cells. The tests were very sensitive, and they are designed to detect effects that would occur at much lower tritium concentrations than effects on whole fish or populations of fish. In order for a biomarker to be useful, you have to see an effect well ahead of the time that trouble happens. So that's why we picked these 8 different tests. Well, what did we find? We found that tritium concentrations up to 115 times higher than those in fish near SRB actually protected fish cells from dying. They didn't kill fish cells, they actually protected them from dying. We saw no evidence that tritium concentrations even 11,500 times higher than those in fish near SRB had any negative effects on the cell's ability to reproduce. So in short, to wrap a whole lot of research up into a very few words, these tritium exposures do not appear to be having any negative health effects that we could see on these cells. And our results are consistent with a very large body of past research and shows that the levels of tritium in the water and in fish near SRB is far below those that we would expect to cause negative effects in fish. So that's tritium in fish. We know that very high doses of radiation, thousands of times higher than those associated with tritium releases from SRB, they do cause negative environmental effects. But our data, our fish data, suggests that very low doses have the opposite effect. Now, if this pattern of negative consequences at high doses and no negative consequences or even protection caused by low doses was only seen in fish exposed to tritium, it would not be compelling. But it's not just fish. Research conducted at CNL has shown that, for example, frogs from ponds that contain low levels of tritium contamination were actually more resistant to a large stress than frogs from ponds where only background levels of tritium existed. But it doesn't stop there. We have seen this same pattern in a variety of organisms, ranging from bacteria, yeast, and algae to several species of plants, frogs, as I mentioned, mice, hamsters, rats, fish, rabbits, deer, cows, and yes, even in human cells. The resistance to environmental stresses has been produced not only by tritium, but other forms of radiation as well. And we've observed a general pattern that moderate stresses, low to moderate stresses, anything from low levels of metals that are toxic in high concentrations, ultraviolet light, heat, even exercise, make living organisms more resistant to more serious stressors, as long as we're talking about low to moderate doses. I even recently found an article that I haven't yet had time to read, reporting that moderate consumption of beer produces a radioprotective effect, and I'm really kicking myself for not thinking of that research idea when I was in graduate school. As I said, I haven't read the article yet, but it's an intriguing proposition. My point is that radiation, which is after all a natural part of the environment and has been since the formation of the planet, it behaves like every other stressor in the environment. It's no different. Living organisms respond to low and moderate stressors by ramping up their defenses and becoming resistant to more significant challenges. Evolution demands it. It's a condition of living on planet Earth. So what does all this mean for SRB's neighbors? Well, you might hear claims that there is no safe dose of radiation, or that even very small doses of radiation increase the risk of negative health effects. Well, those claims are not supported by the scientific evidence, and they go against the advice of scientific experts. What does the evidence say? Well, you heard in the CNSC staff presentation earlier that several epidemiology studies have been conducted looking at workers and the public near Canadian nuclear facilities, and they have failed to show increases in risks associated with tritium specifically, or with low doses of radiation generally. Again, our research shows that low doses are protective, or at the very least, don't cause negative effects. There is simply no evidence that radiation doses comparable to those resulting from tritium from SRB carry any detectable human health risk. Well, that's the evidence, but what do the scientific experts say? Well, scientists from around the world have warned against claiming that there are human health effects caused by radiation exposures as low as natural background and as low as those resulting from SRB's tritium emissions. These include expert advisory bodies like the International Commission on Radiation Protection and the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation. It also includes radiation protection professional societies. For example, the Australasian Radiation Protection Society, the Health Physics Society, the International Organization of Medical Physics, the Society for Pediatric Radiology, and the American Association of Physicists in Medicine. There is a clear scientific consensus that claims of negative health effects from even the smallest doses of radiation are not supported by scientific evidence, and they're not credible. The practice of radiation protection is guided by the ALARA principle, A-L-A-R-A, as low as reasonably achievable. And the CNSC defines ALARA as a tool in radiation protection used to keep individual, workplace, and public doses as low as reasonably achievable. And this next part is very important, social and economic factors being taken into account. Now, the ALARA principle does not dictate that the CNSC must lead a march to zero radiation dose and drive out of business any enterprise that could result in even a trivial radiation dose. That is not ALARA. And I'm concerned that some people have forgotten that there is an R in ALARA, and that R stands for reasonable. The ALARA principle is based on the idea that at some point below regulatory limits, there will come a point where social and economic considerations tell you that it is no longer reasonable to continue to demand that doses be reduced. Now, given that the releases from SRB were 150 times lower than the public dose limit in Canada and about 15,000 times less than the lowest dose known to be associated with negative effects in humans, on that basis, it's my conclusion as a radiation protection professional that ALERA requirements have been satisfied, and I agree with CNSC staff's recommendation that SRB, their request for a license extension, be granted. I think it's in closing, I think it's in one paragraph. I think it's appropriate for the community of Pembroke to have a discussion about what businesses operate here. And the opinions and concerns of SRB's neighbors have to be a large part of that discussion. And that discussion should also be informed by an accurate presentation of scientific evidence on the effects of low doses of radiation. My purpose in coming here today was to provide the Commission and the members of the public with that information that they will need as they go through this discussion. I wish you all success in this discussion, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. And I also want to thank the Commission for the support that was provided through the CNSC's participant funding program. Thank you very much.
Thank you.